I know that you've studied all the great storytelling structures and you've probably got a pretty good grasp on how to tell a story, but there's a problem. Your stories just don't seem to be hitting. They don't seem to be engaging your audience. They seem to be a little flat, a little boring, but you feel like you're doing everything right. Well, don't worry, my friends, because there's probably a little trick that you are overlooking. But luckily for you, that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to the Storytelling Lab, where we break down the art and science of storytelling. My name is Bennett. I am your host, and I'm a filmmaker and an author on a quest to understand how we can tell better stories so that we can do better work and make the world a better place. Each episode, I host one of the world's best storytellers to help you understand how to leverage storytelling to increase your sales, deepen your connections, and serve your audiences better. What's up, storytellers? Welcome back to the Storytelling Lab podcast. This is episode 176, and today we're going to talk about something that I often talk about on the show, in my book, in my social media content, any and everywhere that I'm talking about stories, which is pretty much everywhere, folks. It is about how to keep people engaged with the rhythm, the roller coaster, the ebbs and flows that make up storytelling. I am talking about tension. More specifically, I am talking about increasing tension and then releasing that tension. Now, if you know my work, if you know my content, I talk about this a lot. That is ultimately what you are trying to do. The whole journey of your story, whether long or short, should feel like a roller coaster ride, meaning that there are twists, there are turns, sometimes it plateaus, sometimes it dips, sometimes it climbs, sometimes it goes fast, sometimes it goes slow. Variation is the first key to keeping people engaged. Visual variation, tonal variation, variation in shots, variation in speed and pace and tempo and all of that. When you become monotonous, you become boring. When your story becomes boring, people will tune out. So today we're going to dive deeper into that idea of up and down and shifting energy and increasing the tension and releasing the tension that we see throughout the whole story. We're going to get really, really specific and zoom all the way in so that you can understand how to do that from scene to scene and even sentence to sentence. Now, the beautiful part of storytelling is it's all like in my presentations, I always use this example of the Russian Matryoshka dolls, the stacking dolls, where, one fits within the other, basically. So they're the same shape. They look the same. They're just bigger. That's exactly what storytelling is. So if you think about your favorite TV show, and let's say it's 5 seasons long. Well, the whole series has a narrative arc, a story arc that it follows, right? Beginning, middle, and end, problem, journey, resolution. Each season, therefore, has its own arc. Each episode of each season has its own arc. Each act has its own arc, and all the way down to each scene, meaning there has to be a conflict and a resolution of each scene that moves us forward. So when you think about story, it happens like that. You start, positive generally in act one, or something happens that moves the story forward. Act two is generally downward, emotional journey, or the rising action, they'll call it. But in terms of how you feel and the vibe of the journey, it's usually negative. It's long. You're fighting against all the adversaries that you meet along the way. You try this, it doesn't work. You try that, it doesn't work. So we're in this long negative space of like, will the hero solve the problem? Will they overcome the obstacle? And then generally act three is the resolution, where we are left on more of a positive feel, vibe, energy, etc. So it is an up and down. That's simply the motion. Now, if you want to look at Vonnegut's 6 shapes of stories or whatever, there's a lot of different theories on this, but they are all some version of up and down. So either you start up, then go down and end up, or you start down and then end up like rags to riches, or you start up and then end down in like a tragedy, but it is still the same thing. So it's whether are we using like a quarter of an arc, a half an arc, a whole arc, two arcs, or whatever, it's still the same fluid up and down motion. That's what we're going to talk about today. And it's shifting energy. You start with this excitement of this new journey, this new world, like Joseph Campbell says, and then you go into the cave, the dark part, the dark forest, the dark night of the soul, whatever, analogy you want to use of Act 2, and then you resolve in the climax and you are transformed into a new world, a new person, okay? So Robert McKee from Story fame says that ideally each scene should be a story event. That's the same idea that I'm talking about when I mentioned the Matryoshka dolls. Like each scene has its same little arc, and just like in the whole movie or the whole book, some significant change has to happen. It also has to happen in a smaller version in the scene, right? There has to be a shift of energy and a change. Just like that up and down through Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3, you're going to see that in between scenes to scenes. So the person who I will most often be referencing today, who talks about this a lot, is Sean Coyne, Coyne, who wrote the book about 10 years ago now, Story Grid. And he came up with this whole idea. Now, we're going to talk about parts of the Story Grid, certainly not the whole Story Grid. That could be a whole episode. And Sean, by the way, partners with Stephen Pressfield, a friend of the Storytelling Lab and a mentor, hero of mine and many others across the world. So it excites me because it's a little special connection for those of us in the Storytelling Lab world. And hopefully I can have him on the show and we can talk about the Story Grid a little bit more. But the Story Grid, a couple of things in this idea of how to change tension or change what he calls the polarity. Some people call it the negative charge or the positive charge of a scene. We're going to talk about this polarity shift that he talks about. So just like there should be a change in the acts of your story, there should be in the scenes as well. And what I mean by that is if it starts from a positive point, meaning something good has happened or I'm in a positive place, we should end that scene. This is the crux of what we're going to talk about today. We should end that scene most often with a significant change, as Robert McKee says, usually on the opposite side. So if you start positive, you want that scene to end on the negative side. Conversely, if you start negative, like something bad just happened, to give us that next charge so that we move through the story, you got to give them a little something positive that happens. Okay, I lost my wallet, but I met this beautiful girl in the cab, right? Oh, now I'm on a positive tip. But I found out that she's actually engaged to be married. Oh my God, that's negative, right? So it's so simple. It's just an up and down flow like that. That's what you want to look for. Now, just like in the bigger story, there is a turning point in each scene where that shift happens. There is a turning point, according to Sean Coyne, and that turning point is usually dictated by one or two things, or he says always dictated. It's either a revelation, like you learn something, or you have an idea, or an epiphany, or you find something out, or an action. Something happens, and that shifts it. Just like the climax of a story, when something really finally changes, there is either an action that releases it, or more often in the climax, it's an internal. It's the revelation. But there's a turning point somewhere in your scene. And listen, let me pause for a moment. Let's say you're doing a brand story. Let's say you're doing a LinkedIn post or a TikTok video. Same thing happens. You don't have scenes necessarily, but you have sentences. There's whatever smaller part of your story. So if your story is a 90-second reel on Instagram, then it's made up of sentences. And those sentences, they're still in Act 1 and Act 2 and Act 3, right? And the sentences are your scenes. Those are still the little, up and down moments that you should have. So you should be shifting back and forth throughout this whole thing. It's the same thing. So when I'm talking about scene to scene in a movie, I still want you to think about it, even if you're making a, 250 word post or a 90-second or 60-second video. Okay, you just think about it in sentences instead of terms of scenes. But if you start from a positive place, I just sold my business and had the most money I ever had, but then I lost it all on my next venture. here's what I learned, right? That's like a LinkedIn post, right? But that's that shift. I started high, then I went negative, but I learned something, and that's going to take me to my next venture. That's positive, okay? So there is a turning point. Think about that. Something changes. Each sentence, each scene that you make, each piece of your story, there should be a change that moves it, even if it's just a little bit. It should be significant, but that doesn't mean that it can't be small, because many small changes are significant. Now, Sean takes it even further and shows us that there is also what he calls a value shift. It's not just the charge or the polarity, the negative charge or the positive charge. Whatever the value of the hero is, or the theme of the story. Sometimes there's more than one, but generally it's usually around one. That value shifts as well. So if you are, let's say it's success, it's money. It's money is the value, financial success. That value can shift for when, you lose money gambling, but then as you walk out the door, you found a 20 on the floor, on the ground, right? Again, these are small, but they're significant. It changes the state of things. Doesn't have to be financial, of course, whatever your values are. Let's say it's a love story. So, that might change. If you start the scene feeling really connected, something happens. Here's the turning point. Maybe a little fight. Maybe you find out something from someone else about the person you're falling in love with. And at the end of that scene, you're kind of on a negative polarity shift. But you're also on a negative value shift where it's love that you're looking for. And you started off closer. Well, the value has shifted now and you feel more alone. But then you find the person that you've been dating and you ask her about it and you find out the truth. And now she's been open and authentic and vulnerable with you. So the value shifts again. Now you don't feel more disconnected and alone. Now you feel more connected and more deeply in love because you've earned her trust. She's earned yours in a deeper capacity. So not only is it the feeling or the vibe or the tone that shifts, it's the value of the story, of the hero in the story. I'll give you some more examples here in a moment, but I want to talk about the shifts and the change in the polarity, in the negative and positive charges, so you understand it's not necessarily just changing up and down the whole time, because that again would become monotonous. So it changes like a roller coaster, all different kinds of ways. The main problem we, the storytellers, are trying to avoid is that monotony, that boring element, which removes our audience from the story so quickly. When we realize this is why boring things or repetition kills the story for the audience. We realize we're being told a story when we start to get bored. When we've seen the same shot a couple of times, it's like, oh, I saw that before. And we are removed as the audience. We are pulled out of that story. We realize we are being told a story and the magic is gone. That's why it's so important to have one thing flow into the other thing and keep people on their toes and keep switching it up visually, pace, tempo, tone, all of that. Because when it's woven together like that, just like a roller coaster ride, we've gone on the whole thing and it's over and we didn't even realize it. But if a roller coaster ride had 2 minutes where you were just on a plateau, you'd be like, all right, this part's kind of lame, right? It's the same thing with storytelling. You don't have to go super fast the whole time. You need to, just like the roller coaster, that click, 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 click of tension. You need that for the payoff of the tumble down to be so exhilarating. It's the same thing with storytelling. So just like you don't want it to be all great or all bad because it gets boring, you also don't want it to be up, then down, then up, then down, then up, then down. So here are 4 ways you can change the charge in your scene. Well, we've obviously got positive to negative, which we've already established. We've got negative to positive. I once was lost, but now I am found, right? Those are the easy ones. But then there's positive to positive. Right? So you could, again, think about what Robert McKee said. It has to be significant change. So positive to positive means you start off good, but then, oh my gosh, you find $100 on, you're in love, you're on a date with your future girlfriend, and then you find $100 on the ground. Okay. So you're already in a positive spot, but now you're even More positive because you found money and you can keep the date going, right? You can go out for a nightcap or whatever. I'm making that up. And then the number 4, negative to negative. So that's obviously where, okay, you owe money. The gambler owes money to the loan shark, and they're gambling, and they lose all their money, so they're in a negative spot, right? Because they owe money, they've lost money when they're trying to raise it in the poker match. But then they have a revelation. They get a phone call from one of the henchmen of the loan shark and find out that the deadline for the term of paying that money has now been upped, and it is due by the end of tomorrow. So now we've gone from a negative place to even more negative to negative, because hey, our crappy situation is a lot crappier now. So it has to be significant enough that we feel the difference. Okay? It's a worse place now that you have to pay that money. Not only did I not earn the money in the poker match, but now I have to pay it by tomorrow when I had no way to pay it even a week or a month from now. If it was just, oh, this is a negative thing that happened, and then another negative thing happened, and then another thing, but they're all kind of on the same level, that's that classic like and then trap that we get into. The South Park creators, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, talk about that a lot with their but therefore model, right? There has to be some change. That's what that but therefore model means. This happened, but then this happened. Therefore, this happened. But if you just go negative to negative to negative, it's going to feel like and then, and that's going to kill you. Let's talk about some more examples before we go. I'm from the 90s. I'll talk about Braveheart. That was a classic one that a lot of people love. Let's think about, okay, so we meet William Wallace when he's a kid. He goes off and trains with his uncle, becomes educated, and he comes back to his hometown, his home village, and he meets Murren. He meets Murren and already kind of likes her. And this is a simple man now. I mean, he's not a simple man, but he just wants to come home and have a simple life, get married, have kids, have a farm. Now, real quick, I'll pause and say that I think the theme of Braveheart in a lot of ways is connection and community. It expands, right? But at first, when we meet him, he tells Murren there that he says that he wants to just have some kids and a wife and have a farm, and he comes back to his village and he loves his village. Now fast forward, he ends up making Scotland a united community, not by choice, by force of the inciting incident, but it's still the same thing. Connection. He wants to feel belonging. He wants to feel that the security of community. Because why? I know I'm going too deep down the rabbit hole here. Because he lost it when he was a kid. His father got killed in that war, and so he's been disconnected and on his own. Yes, he was with his uncle, but on his own for years. So he is longing for that safe feel of the tribe, of the village, of the community, and then afterwards of country. So he gets married in secret to Murren. That's a positive scene. We start off there, and he's following her through the village, and she's got on his little scarf and he's got on hers, and he's watching her. It's all positive. And then, if you know the movie, she gets found out by one of the English guards and attacked as if she was going to be raped, and then of course killed. So very, very polar change in the charge of that, right? We start off happy and then we end tragically. This was a very deep spike, and as you see, if you were to trace the scenes of your story up and down, you'll see that sometimes they spike really high in the positive changes, and sometimes they spike really low in the negative ones. But it always doesn't have to be like that. That would be the equivalent of the roller coaster going all the way up and then all the way down, all the way up and all the way down every time. Again, that would be boring. So some of the positive negative spikes aren't as high, right? On this one, it really was negative, but that's because it was the inciting incident. Now, the next scene that we see William is he's coming to give himself up to the English. And they are feeling good about it because he rides in on one horse by himself, value shift, right? Disconnected now, alone, which is not what he wants anymore. And he's coming to give up. And then the shift of that energy, or that polar charge of that scene, goes to positive when all of a sudden he pulls out the weapon from behind his back and he hits that guard, and he ignites his villagers to come together around him, and they take on the English, leaders and military of that particular village that were like kind of overseeing it, and they kill them all. So even though that's a very negative, event, because it was a war or battle and a massacre, it was a positive charge in terms of the story. And the value shifted as well, because now he's not alone. He's created this unification, at least within the village, and he goes on to do it within the country, of course. So I love that example because it shows all of the things that we're talking about, that shift. And any good movie, any good story is kind of an ebb and flow of shifting that energy, that charge of your scene. I want you to think about this, again, no matter how big your story is, no matter how small. It should constantly be taking us on this roller coaster ride. But this is the simplest way I can explain it to you. When you're starting off a sentence, there should be some significant, even if it's small, significant change that tilts the charge of that scene or of that sentence. If you start off in a great place, you need to experience a little bit of conflict that creates a problem. So that then the next scene or the next sentence starts with that problem, and then you have to have some surge that maybe gets you closer to solving it, or either you go further down away from solving that problem. But either way, it needs to keep us going up or keep us going down. Shift them, keep them guessing, keep it changing. Keep increasing that tension and then releasing that tension, and your audience will hold on and stay engaged for the entirety of your story. I hope that helps. I really want you to think about it and apply it to your stories, apply it to your LinkedIn post, apply it to your short form video reels, anything that you can, anywhere that you tell stories. Let me know if you have any questions, and otherwise, I will see you next time on the Storytelling Lab. Peace and love, everybody. My name is Rain Bennett. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed that episode, do us a favor and subscribe to the podcast. If you're already a subscriber and you're enjoying the show, give us a review and let us know the value that you've gotten from it. We love to hear from our listeners and learn about the benefits that they're getting from the show. That's what fuels us, and that's what fuels the show. And if you've already subscribed and you've already reviewed it and you think there's someone else that would benefit from listening to this show, please share it with them. The more we grow, the more we can help you grow, and that's what we're here to do. Join us next time on the Storytelling Lab. This podcast is a 6 Second Stories production. 6 Second Stories is a story coaching and consulting company that builds online education, in-person and virtual training, and digital products that help businesses master storytelling to find their ideal customers and market to them effectively. You can learn more at 6secondstories.com and purchase the book 6 Second Stories at Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, or rainbennett.com/6secondstories.